Hello and welcome to Experts Live UK Community Voices. This series is all about the people behind the Microsoft community, the speakers, experts and community leaders from across the Microsoft ecosystem, who willingly spend their spare time talking about technology for fun. I'm Bruce Cullen, and in each episode I sit down with speakers, community leaders and Microsoft MVPs from across the ecosystem, and we'll talk about their journey, how they got started, the challenges they faced, and ultimately what led them to where they are today. But there's a twist. Each guest also has the privilege of teaching me something new. These folk are leaders in their fields. These are people who have spent years deep in the weeds of their chosen Microsoft technology. So it would be rude of me not to get some free education at the same time. So expect real technical insight from an introduction to an area to the tricks and tips that separate our guest from the rest, the lessons learned the hard way, and the things they wish someone had explained to them before the third night of late-night troubleshooting. The goal is simple: learn something genuinely useful from people who build, break, and fix this stuff for real. So, whether you're just starting out or well into your career, this is about practical knowledge, real experience, and learning from the community. But I'm not alone. No, I'm joined by co-host Geoff Ross. Hello, Geoff. How are you doing?
Hello, Bruce. Yes, I'm doing very well, thank you. Yeah, not too bad. How are you today?
Good to hear. I'm enjoying the fact it's not freezing cold, although the one thing that does mean is my rather warm branded hoodie is a bit warm for today's recording,
Yeah,
but there we go.
I'm on brand today
anyway.
for that reason.
It makes sense. It's a podcast. No one's looking at the video. It's
true.
all good. But we're not alone. You'll be pleased to hear. Otherwise, it would be a rather boring episode. We're also joined by a very special guest in the form of Nikki Chapple, who is a Purview and Copilot specialist and also a 2-times MVP and a principal cloud architect at Cloudway. Welcome to the show, Nikki. Good to have you with us.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be joining you today.
So a good place to start is for listeners who don't know who you are, please can you introduce yourself?
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Nikki Chapple. As you mentioned, I'm a principal cloud architect at Cloudway. So Cloudway are a Microsoft partner, and I specialize in data security, governance, risk and compliance around the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And I'm also a Microsoft MVP, both in Microsoft 365 and security.
That makes sense. There's a whole lot to pick into there. My first, probably stupid question, let's face it, is what is Purview? I've heard it mentioned a few times, but I live my life as a product manager. So there are many Microsoft technologies I do not know, and Purview's one.
Okay. So I think Purview is one of the hidden talents of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem that has been generally underused since I've been in the product space. But since the advent of Copilot, it's finally, I think, getting the recognition that it deserves. So it's a platform to help you govern and secure your data within Microsoft 365 and more recently outside of Microsoft 365. So it's not just in the products. So we've got those areas of, the data security controls, your data lifecycle management controls, but we've also got the third element of the compliance aspects. So maybe your e-discovery and legal searches and how you might need to undertake compliance, posture management, for example, if you're ISO 27001 certified. So it's really talking about kind of the data aspects and the compliance aspects.
I think
Nikki,
that
how
makes
long has
sense.
it been? How long has Purview existed? I still think it's quite a new thing, but from what you just said, maybe it's not.
Yeah, well, it's like everything in Microsoft. It's had its name changes. Like Entra used to be,
Azure AD.
What was it before?
Active Directory.
Not Entra, I mean Purview, sorry.
So for Purview, it was part of security and compliance portal. So it was kind of bundled into where all kind of the security stack, and then the security is now gone off, and that's under the Defender branding. And the data security, governance and compliance has moved under the Purview branding. It's been there for several years now. But I think what I find is it's an area that doesn't often have an owner in the organization. I think people within, security, identity, access management live in the Entra and the Defender world, and they don't often cross into Purview because We're talking about data, and data is not owned by IT. Data is owned by the business. So there's never those simple questions of, oh, do I just switch it on? You've got to kind of have that kind of a joint approach to it. So it's not like, MFA, am I going to switch it on or off? What conditional access policies I'm going to put on, which are like IT-led decisions. How are you going to classify and govern your data? We can put the controls in place, they're easy, but how you actually apply that to your data, you've got to get that full buy-in from the business. So it's kind of a longer process to implement.
That makes sense. I think you've sort of already answered my next question, which was basically what's the overlap with the rest of the bits and pieces that are in M365 and Copilot. So I was going to talk about specifically Defender, because to the untrained ear, that sounds like the piece of M365 which has the most overlap. Is there anything, any nuance to add, I guess?
Purview sits on the top of that, all the data inside Microsoft 365, whether it's kind of the SharePoint, Exchange, other services, that's all can be governed by Purview. So you've really got to have that holistic, look, and to do proper data security and governance, it's not just about one tool. You need to have that true enterprise architecture view. So when you're talking about managing your data, you need to talk about the information architecture within the SharePoint, how we're going to structure that, how we're going to govern those sites. And then you've got your data layer, which is kind of where Purview fits in. And then particularly as we're moving on to things like AI, it overlaps with things like, Defender, because the Purview controls can go into Defender for Cloud to govern your Gen AI apps. It overlaps with Defender for Endpoint, because if you put in endpoint DLP policies in place, you've got to integrate with Defender for Endpoint. So it kind of crosses over a lot of different product sets. You can even cross over into Entra and combine with conditional access policies and with Purview.
That makes sense. I saw somebody who was talking about that really recently, and it made a lot of sense. Said as someone, we're in the middle of looking at ISO 27001, and we're looking at basically what do we need to do? What do we need to do? What's our hit list from a modern workspace perspective? It sounds like Purview is the right place to start my journey.
Yeah, definitely. So for that particular part is within the kind of compliance space. There's something called Compliance Manager. Within that, if you've got like the E5 suite licenses, you can get 3 templates from certifications. So there's an ISO 27001 2022 version, which has overtaken the 2013 version. So when we went through our compliance journey for the organisation, that was one of the first places I went to. Go in there, you can assess your posture within Microsoft 365. It clearly lays out what's Microsoft responsibilities and what your responsibility, because Microsoft is a SaaS product. So some of the controls that we need to demonstrate in Microsoft 365 are actually implemented by Microsoft. So it kind of gives you that view of where you need to focus your actions. And it gives you top tips as to how to implement those things as well. So it's not just a checklist, it's giving you those prompts of, am I doing this right? And it's giving you suggestions of what you might want to configure.
Makes sense. How do you sort of get started
just jump back,
with it?
sorry, because we love license chat.
Oh, go on.
Did you say that you need E5s to kind of get all that?
Yeah, it's a specific one. So if you've just got a non-E5, Business Premium, Business Basic, E3. So when you go into Compliance Manager, you kind of get the baseline. So you get a baseline that's based on things like GDPR, some bits of NIST and ISO. You're not going to get the full things, but it's kind of, we think that this is the best practices that every organisation should have. It's the same with things like AI governance as well. There's a baseline there. If you actually want to demonstrate, with particular regulations, you can go, there's like ISO 27001, ISO 42001, which is AI, EU AI Act. You've got NIST, FedRAMP. You've got all of the different major controls around the world that you can use not only with the Microsoft products, but you can get generic versions as well. So if you're using them with Azure or Amazon Web Services, etc., it's giving you those things to look at. And even better, if you've got multiple controls and regulations to comply to, which a lot of organisations have, then what you can do is, rather than looking at things in isolation, they're overlapped on each other. So whereby you can say, well, things like MFA and conditional access policies, data security, data lifecycle management, they satisfy several controls over different policies. So it means as you're building, you can see your posture grow on each of the relevant regulations.
Ah, very cool.
That is very cool. AI governance is something that's sort of hot right now in my particular world. I didn't know there was an ISO standard for it, which is interesting to know. Is it the insight it gives? Is it easy to consume? How is that sort of consumed?
So yeah, because I think it gives you the control, as in the standard, so you can follow that along there. So you've got your standard documentation, you have a look in there. Then it says who's responsible, so it's something that Microsoft's responsible for. If Microsoft's responsible, it describes what they've done. And it also describes and provides the evidence that they're actually doing what they say they're doing. So, you can just, we don't want it to be a tick box exercise, tick, tick, tick. You need to be able to demonstrate it. And then for your controls that's in your path that they do is they give them risk scorings anywhere between 1 and 27. The higher the points, the bigger the risk. So, you prioritize based on points. And then you can kind of work your way through as you fill them in and you satisfy the needs based on your business requirements. Some of the controls are automatically synced back. So it says, I can see that someone has now configured sensitivity labels for the organisation. So rather than being 0 points, I might go up to 9 points. Now, some of the controls you do have to manually type in, and some of the controls are not necessarily going to be as Microsoft describes. So, for example, if you're not using the Microsoft MFA products and you're using something, third party, for example, Duo, or you're not using Defender for endpoint, then you actually can write in there and say, I'm not doing that. And then you can say, well, don't bother scoring that anymore, because if it's automatically scoring you and saying, well, you're 0 on MFA, well, no, that you've met you've satisfied the requirements. So you just say, take that score out of scope. I find it really useful. You can export it to Excel if you want to take it out.
It does
and use it.
sound really useful. I need to go and have a look, because I need to figure out AI governance at some point in a day job context. So I know
you'll have
I've
to
got some
come and
homework.
ask me after this call, so I've got lots of information.
Exactly.
It's one of my top things at the moment.
Maybe there's some sort of session soon at an event.
Yeah, I did one this morning, actually. I did an hour, 8 o'clock this morning, an hour's webinar on it.
Okay, very good. Give me the link after, track it down and have a look. But there's a lovely segment to sort of community, and obviously you're speaking at Experts Live UK, which is awesome. What are you speaking on?
Well, I've got 2 sessions, really. So I've got one of the lightning talks. So it's a short 30-minute session, and it's called Containers First, Files Next, and a layered path to Copilot readiness in Microsoft 365. So as I alluded to earlier, when we're doing anything regarding data security, data governance, we have to involve the business. And that can often be complex and take a long time. So what I've kind of put here now is it aligns in with the Microsoft blueprints, but say, let's focus on the containers. So these are your workspaces, your SharePoint sites effectively, and your OneDrive. That's where our data sits. And let's look at putting govern controls on those, because you've got far less SharePoint sites. So you might have 10,000 SharePoint sites, but you might have 50 million files. So, let's kind of focus on working out ways of prioritizing that and actually tightening those controls around the workspaces as something that's a relatively quick win that you can get in place. Most people are unaware that you can use sensitivity labels to provide access governance.
That's something I came across in the context of ISO, but once you see them and you're like, oh, okay, it's actually really intuitive. Go on, Geoff. You can ask the question? Maybe not.
I'm sorry, you broke up there.
Or did I? Oh, the joys of doing these things remote. Let's move on. So
I was just
you
going
were
to
a
ask
principal
about
cloud
the
architect.
session.
Oh,
Some lag here.
there's some lag. Go for it,
Straight
Geoff.
out that session you described that you did in the lightning session. What sort of level is that pitched at in terms of, I guess, both 2 things. One is, do you need to know a bit about this stuff, purview and compliance? And 2, Is it also kind of a technical session in terms of the technical delivery and setup and configuration of things in M365? Or is it a bit more kind of theory based?
It's a bit more theory-based. For 30 minutes, it's difficult to actually kind of walk through end to end, but it's making people aware that actually we've got such amazing tools, particularly in Purview, but people are unaware of them. So it's kind of giving them an idea of this is the art of the possible. This is what you can do. Go away and you can quickly put something in your organization, and you can quickly start by saying, well, I don't want, I'm going to review all my public sites. Public site has everyone except external users permission. That means SharePoint can see everything in your public groups and teams. Well, you can put container labels on, script update all your sites and say, well, I want them all to be private, for example, and it will change those permissions around. So there's some really quick wins you can do, because once you've set them up, you can script update your sites.
Makes a lot of sense. Sounds like a really interesting session. I'm thinking of all the things I haven't done in a day job for spec context, which is the cogs are very much turning. I'm going to change gears slightly to focus a bit on you and your career fundamentally. So you're a principal cloud architect. Now that's a pretty broad job title. What does a typical day look like for you with that in mind?
Okay, so I kind of, as I mentioned before, I'm more of an enterprise architect, so it could be anything really on sort of the Microsoft 365. Predominantly now, obviously, everything is around Copilot and AI. That is really, increased the risk of data. When I moved into more of this role, it was when everybody was moving from Skype for Business into Teams, and I was working for a telephony company, and they were, Skype for Business didn't hold much data there. There wasn't much risk, but when they moved everything over into Teams, obviously that opened up the world of Microsoft 365. So that's where I've kind of been focused in on the governance. And, unfortunately, SharePoint is often a dumping ground of information. People haven't necessarily had the controls. And, there's a saying, security by obscurity. Now, that was always been, good until Copilot. It's like search on steroids, really. And my analogy is, before it was like finding a needle in a haystack. You had to know where it was to have a good chance of trying to find it. Now it's like Copilot stood outside of the haystack. It's got a massive, great big magnet, and it just sits there, and all the needles, all your corporate secrets come out if you've got access to them. So a lot of it is working with organizations about building up their maturity. So often I'd go in and do a baseline assessment. We need to understand where you are before we can plan. And then it's understanding what pace of change do they want? What help do they want? And it's kind of building on that kind of a maturity model. Where are they in their posture for, SharePoint architecture, Teams architecture, Purview, data security, governance, Copilot, whatever the elements it may be, and then say, well, how are we going to improve that over time?
It makes total sense. Interesting. I need to contract you for some stuff, I think, is the answer. Just thinking of your career now, so you mentioned Skype for Business, transition to Teams. Was that how you got started in tech, or is there more that came before?
No, it's a longer history of that. So I started in tech now 40 years ago. So my first job was with a telco company. So I've been in telecoms, not all my career, but been in two telco companies. So my career is, I started off with BT, and there was a computer centre near where I live. Now we're talking about computer centres when we were the age of mainframe computers. So, so ICL 2966s, and they had punched cards that were being typed in, and that would load your programs in big open reel discs. We had like teletypes, or you might fax something through to anyone. So I'd started off on the operations there, and then I moved into actually governance. These machines were super, super expensive. They took up a huge amount of electricity and air conditioning, and we only had finite amount of space. So I was doing capacity planning, not only for like the building, what we were doing, but ensuring that architecture was used efficiently and effectively. So basically going around and trying to claw back space. So like putting retention and governance rules in place. This was super, super expensive then, So because it was so expensive, there was a lot of control around how we could use the data. Now it's effectively free. You think of your phones and everything, get huge amounts of stuff. And we just keep filling it in, and we only shout when it gets full, sort of thing. So it's a different way of kind of that whole, I suppose, data security, data lifecycle management, retention. We used to send open reel tapes off-site to another location. So we'd have, fallback whole disaster centres with complete computers. So when you needed to, close one down for anything, we could spin up another one anywhere else. And BT had loads of these big data centres. And I was just lucky enough to start my career in that.
That's really interesting. So you've seen a whole bunch of change. I think that we're going to end up with, so effectively the efficiency angle, when you talk about, mainframes and saving every bit of space you can, I think we're going to end up back there in an AI context, but driven by the cost of credits. And obviously, the reason why there's so much is because of the amount of resources that they take to generate and kind of be used. So I think all of those skills are going to be like super important for the world we live in now, outside of the obvious security one. That's really interesting. So how about sort of community? How did you get into community to start with?
I suppose throughout my career, I've always liked sharing the information that I've learned. So a lot of the time I've been involved in things like, business analysis, project management, enterprise architecture. So you need to actually bring people along with you on the projects. When I was working, not as a consultant, but I was working in-house, I always had like the complicated projects to deal with. And it was a case of, this is never just been an IT project. You've got to bring the business with you. So it was always about trying to make the complex simple. And I think that's what it is. And I think particularly in the Microsoft side, everything, it's not just Microsoft, the whole world is moving so fast with technology at the moment. Is how do we keep up? Even I struggle to keep up. But then how can we kind of translate all of this information into practical guidance to support organisations, particularly smaller ones where they might have like very small IT departments. They haven't got the time to go and find out. So if I can provide, some bite-sized information that will help someone go away and say, oh yeah, that's useful, I'm going to implement that will help kind of secure my data. I think if just one person listens and acts on that, I've won.
So am I understanding that you sort of first got involved in the community as and I might not like my own phrasing in a minute, but as a giver, a sharer of knowledge rather than a receiver first initially?
Yeah, I think because I was doing these projects, you had to go and kind of sell yourself to different stakeholders. We had to kind of get the business on board. You had to say, well, this is how we're going to change things. And then I think it was during lockdown where I got more involved. We were all sat there, we couldn't go out and about. So it was a case of what more can we do? There was more like online conferences, and it was just, I think I really got into it there because we couldn't go out and about. So for me, it was something to spend my time. And I found actually I really enjoy those.
Yeah, that's brilliant. We've,
That's
the
cool.
reason I was sort of just trying to think to my way in there is because we talk a lot about how, everyone in the community has something to offer and has something to learn, right? No one's an expert in everything. And everyone's got something to share, whether they are a speaker or otherwise. They've got their own experience. So, but yeah, what I find, certainly in my experience, is that most people's first involvement community as, attending an event, trying to learn, trying to meet people, trying to network. It's just interesting that you've sort of come at it from a different way, which is brilliant.
It is. And it sounds to me that what I was sort of going on to ask is that your introduction to community has been conferences, so speaking as opposed to like blogging, which is the most common answer I've got to that question so far. Is that true?
No, because I've got a blog and I've got a YouTube channel and I speak at an event. So I do a bit of everything,
A whole lot,
really.
yeah.
All good.
Because
Run the
what I try
gambit.
to do, is kind of share my knowledge. So if I'll create a blog, well, that blog is probably off a speaking session that I've done. So for the session, that I'm going to be doing that containers first file next, well, I've actually got a blog on that. And then I've got some other blogs that I can link to. And, I'll probably record a session, for example. If it's recorded, then I kind of cross-link the things through because people, it's great to do things at conferences, but you're only hitting a small amount of the
Yes. Yeah.
market. People are local. If it costs money, it's difficult for people from far away to travel there. So if I can share that information in different media formats, so either on blog or YouTube, then yeah, I do that as well.
I think that's very admirable. For aside from the hitting more people, different people learn in different ways. For me, if it's text, I'm going to struggle. If it's like audio, video, it's going to work for me. So personally, I appreciate that. That's really cool. How did the whole MVP thing come to be? Was that something that happened on the journey, or was that something you were sort of looking for deliberately?
It wasn't something I was looking for. It was again during lockdown. I can't remember the name of the conference, but I was just speaking to somebody and they were really surprised. They said, "Oh, you're not an MVP already?" Because at that time I was already blogging and already speaking. And they said, "Oh, had I thought about it?" So I kind of looked into it and I thought, "Oh, yes, I think, because I'm already doing these things anyway, let's give it a shot and let's see if I make the grade." Because I know it's a bit of a black art with, what do you need to not only become an MVP, but obviously we have to retain it every year. So it's not a one time only. And that bar as to, what things are needed changes over time. So, yeah, I thought, well, why not? That'll be a nice thing to do because I'm doing in that space anyway. And I was lucky enough to be accepted.
Which is awesome.
Was
One
that
thing I should ask you. Oh, go on, Jeff.
to kind of just get the recognition, which clearly you deserve for that, or was it about that then opening more doors for you and giving you a bigger reach and that sort of thing? Something else?
A bit of both, really. I think it's nice to be
Yeah,
recognised.
absolutely.
I think, and also, um, maybe in some things, people may respect you and respect your words a little bit more if you're
Hmm.
an MVP. But I think it also gives you something to keep driving for. Because
Mm,
if you're not an MVP, if I decide actually I'm not going to do my blog tomorrow, or I'm not going to do this, then you can get sidetracked and not do anything. By continuing to be an MVP every year, as I mentioned, we have to demonstrate every year our community activities. So it gives you that kind of impetus to kind of keep moving, keep sharing, and by sharing, I have to learn. So it encourages me to learn the new things because that's what people want to know, what's happening in the
yeah,
latest of tech. So I
absolutely.
have to learn it. I have to understand it to make the complex simple to be able to share it with everyone else.
Yeah, I like that.
That's great. And where do people go to find all of this knowledge? Where's your blog? What's your YouTube channel?
Well, the blog is nikkichapple.com. So that's nice and easy. And the YouTube channel is all things M365 compliance. And I co-host that with Ryan John Murphy from Microsoft. And that's Purview rated. But we are rebranding it. So a new name will be launched soon. So on that area.
It's very good. I would advise you go and check it all out. So just on the community topic, so we've touched on the fact you're speaking at our community conference already. We've only talked about one of your two sessions. The other thing
Yeah.
you're involved in is the Women in Tech panel. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I was invited to join the panel by Evelina, a fellow MVP, also in the Purview space.
Hmm.
There's not many Purview MVPs
And
and
fellow
even less
podcast.
women
Yes.
in the space as well. And I think for me, it's really important, we're a diverse world, yet particularly in the kind of more security space, because it's different in different areas of technology. The number of women that I work with on a day-to-day basis is very low. For example, the other week I was in the European Collaboration Summit and I was doing a day workshop with Sarah Fenner, and there was only one lady in the room. We've got two female presenters and there was only one lady. I think I'd have been heartbroken if there wasn't any. But it was still in this kind of world where women are underrepresented in different areas. It again depends on which sphere of technology. And it's a case of, well, why is that? We need to have equal representation. And, I've seen the challenges being a woman working in a male dominated world. And I think sometimes it puts women off. They dip their toes in. They find actually, I'm not comfortable working around. Early in my career, it was all men. So you were the only kind of woman in there, and it's a case of how can we encourage people younger in their career to start getting into tech? It's a whole pipeline. How can we
Mm,
encourage women that maybe partway through their career and actually say, "I think I could give this tech clerk a go." How can we encourage
yeah.
that cross transfer in? And this isn't something just for women; it's something for everybody, really.
Mm,
We need to have that diverse mixture of people because that
mm.
means, we'll get better results in the end.
Exactly. Diverse opinions equals better results is the nub of it for me. So if people agree, I hope people agree out there, what would you suggest to them as to how they can kind of support the cause and help to change things in their sphere of influence?
I think if you're in a position where you're hiring people in IT and in tech, it's look at your resources within the organisation. Are there roles that can be filled by internal people? Look at transferable skills and that cross transfer. See if there's opportunities to speak to people, and encourage people to move into tech. And see what that offers. I'm not sure, kind of positive discrimination. I only want women to apply is the right approach because I can, for me, I think that can have a bad backlash. But it's how can we encourage people? And if there are women in departments where they are very heavily male focused, it's making sure that it does feel like it's an inclusive environment for them and that they don't feel too alienated.
Mm,
So
I
it's
think those are
getting
all
that
really important
mentoring,
points.
isn't it, and support.
Yeah.
Mm. And so someone is considering, some woman out there is considering a change in career, a career in tech. What's one piece of advice you could give them?
Depending on what you're in, I think some women think they're all super technical roles, like you're a security engineer going and stuff. But particularly in the area I'm involved with, it's all about that enterprise architecture. It's pulling people together. It's understanding what the problems are. It's about solving problems. It's like a jigsaw and everything. And quite often those skills come from not only other parts of the business, but often the women are left to look after the home and bring up the children and working and cooking and doing all of these things at the same time. So we're quite often used to juggling those things and problem solving. Those skills often work really well. And particularly if we're needing to deal with the end business, well, quite often 50% of that end business is likely to be women as well. So again, it's
Yes.
building the relationship with people in the organisation and getting those different views across.
It's great advice. So, with all of your experience, you've seen a whole bunch of things over the course of your career. What's the one thing you'd tell your younger self starting in tech? One thing you know now that you didn't know then?
Gosh, that's hard, really.
That is a hard one.
Definitely
Sorry.
for me, think over the years you become more confident in your own skin, and I think when you're younger, sometimes you question yourself a lot. So I don't, kind of often you'll get imposter syndrome more. So I think often as you kind of get older and you've got more life experiences, I find that doesn't worry me so much. So I'm now more confident. I'm happy to go out and stand in front of people.
Mm,
If people, I don't feel worried about it. When I was younger, I'd be really, super concerned about that. And I think that's probably the same for a lot of people. Having that experience really helps.
mm. Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
S-
And again, we've talked
So,
about that on previous with other guests on this show. We've talked a lot about imposter syndrome and how you never kind of quite feel ready and how you don't know everything and worried about what questions are going to come. So yeah, it's certainly a very common theme.
sadly true. Sadly
Mm.
true. And here's the thing: no one knows everything.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's sadly true, but it's also just true, and something that we can all just acknowledge and respect.
Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. So, thinking about the future now, what are you sort of most interested in sort of learning or sort of focusing on? So, piece of Microsoft technology or from the broader world of tech?
So yeah, I suppose my focus now it's got to be on generative AI and protecting our data. It's becoming even more important. So you've got the data protection aspect, but I think just as important is data quality. If we look at data and read it, we can say, did this book come from the library? Was it written by an authoritative person? Am I looking up peer-reviewed journals, etc.? Well, when you get Copilot or any of these other AI tools that have hoovered up everything in the internet, whether it's quality information, part quality, out-of-date information, or speculative information, it doesn't necessarily know the difference between those two. So, the quality of the information and the accuracy is and the relevance, today's relevant, it was correct a year ago, doesn't mean it's correct now. So it's trying to, how can we kind of get that balance right? And when you've got millions of files going back, I don't know, 10 years, plus all the stuff you migrated in, because you migrated them in from the on-premise service. So you've probably got 20 years worth of data just sat in Microsoft 365 that the Copilot could look at if you have access to it.
Makes total sense. It's funny how some of the basics, the fundamentals, good security posture, role-based access control over your data and files, cleaning up basically is still probably more relevant now than ever before. That's really interesting. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of Expert Side UK Community Voices. But of course, we talked a bit about the conference over the course of this episode. The show is coming up really, really soon on the 11th and the 12th of June. And so if you like what you've heard from Nikki, I certainly do. AI governance is something that I'm going to have to pick your brain on at some point. That it's very worth coming. Tickets are now on sale, and they are very reasonably priced, if I do say so myself. Day one tickets are £130, and 2-day tickets are £15. Day one is sort of deep dive content, so really getting into a topic and getting hands-on. Day two, think more kind of traditional conference. If you're interested in kind of going deeper and still sort of getting high-level overviews of sort of new topics and also networking, I would go for the 2-day one. It's not crazy expensive at the end of the day. So please do go and check that out. And so all that's really left to do is to say a huge thank you, Nikki, for sharing your journey, your experience, and most importantly, for teaching me a whole bunch of new stuff without making me feel stupid like I should have known it already. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Normally I would introduce... No, not at all. It's been great to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Normally, this is the point of the episode where I talk about who's kind of coming up next. But right now, I have no guests lined up. So, dear listener, if you'd like to suggest somebody for me to speak to, please do find me at Expert Side UK or at Bruce Cullen, I guess my LinkedIn is. I don't really remember. We'll go and find somebody. But if not, Expert Side UK in June has almost 50 speakers from memory. So there's plenty of people that are in my sights that I'll go and slowly speak to. If I don't get any suggestions and recommendations. And of course, if there's a topic you think we should touch on, or a particular person you'd like to hear from, send them my way too. I'll go and track them down and make it happen. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please do like, subscribe, share, follow all those good things at Experts Live. For more, we're on obviously Spotify, YouTube, and of course LinkedIn. So it's not hard to find us. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Goodbye.